Big news around the block. A lot of fixes coming to World Rugby and especially the 2027 Rugby World Cup. Let's get into it.
I need all the wins, yeah. Ain't no L's, I gotta get a no call and quits, yeah. Gotta keep on moving no matter how hard.
Here comes Danny Tusizawa, back to Baker, Baker with the fin. Kurt Baker in for DC, and this may well do it old glory with the try. The New Zealand Sevens legend, Kurt Baker with the cherry on top.
Can you believe it?
Welcome back, everyone, to the On the Line Rugby Podcast, a show brought to you by the Believe Sports Network. I'm your host, Mike Nagaishi, and welcome in. Man, I've got to say I am very impressed with World Rugby, despite the fact of this World Cup arguably being one of the best tournaments, not only televised, but fan experience-wise of all time, especially in the matchups. Great tournament all around. To see them doing markable improvements to not only the provincial men's and women's game, but to the World Cup fixtures itself that a lot of people, myself included, have been clamoring for. This could be huge. This is coming from a lot of these graphics are going to be coming from, for those watching the visual portion, are coming from Rugby Center and my homie, the Black Jersey. Shout out to him. Shout out independent creators all around. Obviously, they're the people growing the game. World Rugby, you probably need to step up with that. Just saw Squidge Rugby's video on the World Cup final taken down. Everyone from the big to the small is dealing with it. Let's get fixed into it. The only way to grow the game is through fan engrossment, and the easiest way to do that is through passionate people like independent creators that can get it done. So in terms of World Cup improvements, the Rugby World Cup 2027 will be hosted between October 1st and November 13th. The tournament will be expanded from 20 to 24 teams, which means more teams in the seating, and hopefully another pool to then add on to the better ability for teams to now have less pools of death. It's now a 6-week instead of 7-week World Cup format, and obviously 6 pools of 4 teams with round 16 to be introduced with the top 2 from each pool, same as this year. In terms of automatic qualifications, automatic qualifying along with the best 4 third place teams. So that's perfect. That allows for an extra set of teams to then come in. So you're not locked out probably about halfway through if you have 2 losses. Now, losses mean a little less, but in terms of making the points, that means more. So that's great. Men's games obviously get some love too. I don't have notes for women's yet. Sorry about that. Those graphics, I hope, will come out as soon as possible. In terms of the men's game, we have the first ever global calendar for men's rugby with new competitions, including the Nations Cup. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But with 2026 starting it, and there's clear international windows, confirmations of release windows for the Rugby World Cup in Australia, at least, probably going to come to America as well. We'll have to see about that. Obviously, the expansion of the World Cup teams and the biannual, which means obviously once every 2 years, of the world nations, including 12 teams from, let's see, you got Japan, Fiji, Australia, obviously New Zealand, South Africa, Argentina. You got your boys in the Six Nations. That's going to be the new group, mostly led by Sanzar, so props up to them. Normally probably one of the more, I'm not going to say on the nose, but more isolationist unions, I guess you could say, in terms of cooperation, and they're really pushing the ball forward with this. I really think this is huge. I do think that the omission of a lot more South American teams, I thought that there should be more along the lines of a Georgia should have definitely have been in there, maybe Romania or Portugal. I definitely think Chile should have been in there, but I think the South American teams and the USA teams will be, or just America's teams in general, will be better served in that Pacific Nations Cup. I think the Islander teams deserve to be in there as well. Probably that divide is a little bit different. Obviously, we've had the Pacific Nations, but it's not the same without obviously Fiji and Japan. So, I mean, could you have better served it by combining the 2 tournaments? Yes, but I think this is a good start for what we're looking at. And there's obviously promotion and relegation, so there is options for maybe a Georgia to sneak in there, maybe a Samoa or Tonga to sneak in there. And these all start from about 2030. So we have a lot more time to go. But, in terms of relegation, that's huge. I definitely think that you need to have that to really show off teams that have earned their spot and are willing to push the ball forward in that regard. It'll give obviously more experience to those teams, especially in Japan, who hopefully will get Eddie Jones. As I've said once, I'll say it again. He deserves to be back there. Australia just destroyed his mental health and confidence. But obviously, as it all says in the release, it provides crucial opportunities and certainty of fixtures for unions currently outside of the existing annual competitions, as well as offering promotions from Tier 2 to Tier 1. And I think that's going to be huge for a lot of the smaller teams, obviously the islands in Japan, in that regard. In terms of other competitions, the competition also provides players and fans with compelling matches to build audiences and value for all. I think that's great if you can build that fan engrossment. Obviously, they're riding off of 2 World Cups and a Lions series, in which obviously the fan engrossment is brought to another level. I hope they build fantasy into that again. I think that brought a whole new brand of rugby fan into the mix and grew more fans with it as well. I definitely think that this is also a step, as long as they can keep growing, especially through private equity partnerships, whether it is through people like Silver Lake or other private equity firms that help sponsor the game. I mean, yes, you're giving up a little bit of stake, but you're getting so much back when it comes to equity and money to move around more, that obviously a lot of these provincial unions, whether it's New Zealand, Australia, even England at the right now, just, moving the ball forward is going to be huge. And that's one big step that you could do for there. There's obviously a significant uplift for crossover matches between the unions, and the global calendar will be a little bit rolled over in the next 2 years. And obviously the launch, as I've said earlier, of the new expanded Pacific Nations Cup, and that will include Canada, Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, and the USA, with home and away fixtures. I feel like this tournament shouldn't exist, and you should just group them together with the Nations Cup. I feel like that would just have been better off. Pacific Nations is a well regarded tournament in terms of for the Islander nations, but come on now. I mean, what's the point of having 2 cups that basically compete against each other when you can just build them onto the nations, build them up into a smaller World Cup, I guess. Make it a round robin, make it a home and away, boom, 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 and then it's done. It's a beautiful thing. Get it done. I think this is going to be the last couple years. There's going to be 3 additional matches per year in this tournament, in addition to the new international competition, as well as crossover fixtures. I think that this is just a sign of things to come. Obviously, you're going to have this tournament probably going on for the next 3 to 4 years. I think once the next World Cup rolls over, this tournament will cease to exist, and the Nations Cup will be the big ticket competition. Or you could make this in, I guess, the Rugby Championship. Well, you can't really, actually, now that I think about it, because of Japan and I believe Fiji also joining the Rugby Championship as well. So such is life. It'll happen. Props Pacific Nations for kind of getting their act together and kind of holding it through, but not going to happen. In terms of supporting the men's game as well, they also add that they're adding clarity for elite league and cross-border club competitions and supporting growth investment. If you can get better money to teams, enough said. I'm happy for them. Great job. That's going to be it for the World Rugby improvements. Now on to my personal favorite news of the week. Rossi Erasmus is taking over the job as coaching for the Bok in relation to the departure of Jacques Nienaba. Man, this is huge news. I never expected Rossi to come out of his office as director of rugby. I was kind of sad when he left head coach in terms of after the Rugby World Cup. And obviously, his actions have been well publicized, for better or for worse, for those of you who support it, for those of you who don't. Understandable both ways. But I think it's a confusing point for South Africa, given the amount of pressure that they're under to really improve their game and add more into the quote unquote old guard uninvolving statement that's currently brewing with them. Obviously, as most people know, their game is a lot more slower, more physical, more drawn out, more possession based. That's great, but I definitely think that, as I've said before, that you need to evolve to fit the growing game. Teams are starting to open them up with more open play moves, and obviously the All Blacks have shown that they can play that same game as well and do it at a higher level with the better athletes available. So if you look at the way the Boks play, if they can get back to where they were at that Lions test series, or even on that second All Blacks test, they definitely need to show a lot more of that open play, just because, as I said before, you're not going to have a lot of opportunities to really make stuff happen down the long run without it. And you need to have more tricks in your bucket than just being really physical at the breakdown, really physical at scrums and set piece play. I think Rossi would be the best coach in terms of scheming that to do it. I definitely think he knows, obviously, how to sub and all that, given that what we've seen at the World Cup stage. But it's going to come down to that and how they replace a lot of the players that they will lose or have lost already in this cycle. It just depends. I have no idea what that'll be. I would love to see them embrace more of a Ireland style, who can still be physical but still have open field play, or a Sail Shark kind of style, which obviously, Alex Sanderson was, I think, the dark horse for that job. In terms of the search, I really just don't know what happened. Maybe there was something with contracts. Perhaps they didn't like what they were seeing so far, whether it's from Sanderson, Dobson, or Dupree, at least from my list, or if they had others on the docket, or maybe this is the plan all along. Jacques goes away, he gets his opportunity from Rossi. Rossi comes back in and recoaches the boys. I hope it'll be revealed soon. I don't think it will, given how tight-lipped South Africa normally is when it comes to press releases. But I definitely think this could, if not done correctly, could set them back a tad, just because, as I've said, the ability to evolve is huge. Rossi's a great coach. We all know that. He's a great schemer, but it just is going to come down to how they're going to be able to move past where they are right now and keep their heritage, but move it into a new stage of its life. I don't know who would come in to bring in, who Rossi could bring in to keep the staff. Perhaps he'll keep his same staff. Obviously don't fix what isn't broken. But in terms of attacking, I definitely think that there needs to be a change. With Nienaber gone, obviously he could promote from within. I believe Nienaber was his attack and set piece coach. Their other coach for set piece is actually now with England. I'm not sure if he's still there with Steve Borthwick, but he was there with Eddie Jones. So you got options. I mean, you could obviously still bring in a guy like Sanderson or Dobson for that open play attack. I hope they do, and we'll have to see and wait a little bit to see what happens out of that. In terms of domestic news for all my American fans, looking up, you got a little bit of shakeup down there in NOLA. I was a little confused with this move, but looking back on it, I guess it kind of makes sense. Obviously, Kane Thompson, the coach for the last 2 years, has done a interesting job, I guess you could say, put it lightly, when it comes to running the offense and defensive side of NOLA. They've had their ups. They've definitely had their downs. They've improved markedly since their 4-11 start with Kane, and I believe it was 9-7 or along those lines, just a little bit above 500 record. But in terms of what they brought in, I think that they brought in a remarkable improvement across the board. I think it just needs to be seen as to how they'll evolve the back line. So Kane Thompson, the current head coach, will be staying on actually as a assistant and consultant. He'll be focusing more on the forwards and the defense, which is exactly what I think NOLA did very well. Their physical play was exactly what drew me in when I was covering them for TRN. They definitely have a great attack, and obviously you have fullback prop Jared Adams, who is a filthy, filthy boy who can do everything around the block. I think that having Kane Thompson there was amazing for his growth, and I can't wait to see what NOLA does in that regard. They bring in Coach Corey Brown. For those of you who may know, he is the younger brother of Highlander coach, or recently departed Highlander coach, Tony Brown. He's a good coach by the looks of his credentials. I'm looking at a lot of it, and I'm kind of impressed and kind of worried at the same time. So he has experience, obviously, with his brother at the Highlanders. He has experience at Connacht, and obviously with New Zealand under-20s, which is where he made his bread and butter. He's also very famously known over the last 3 years for coaching the Georgian attack, who really did shine, I think, above their weight in this year's World Cup. Given what they brought to the table in terms of Beka Gigashvili, one of my props for the comp, I definitely think that NOLA has upgraded in that forward pack regard. They're stacking up and seeing what they do remarkably well. Obviously, that's in the forwards. That's moving the ball forward with physical play through their back line. JP Duplessis probably going to run that into the ground. They have a couple new draft picks, obviously, but, I think this, if done right, could be very well executed. If not, could be an interesting, more setback, I guess, to the evolution of their game than what they're going for. Obviously, through their draft, they drafted a lot of athletic but physical players, but they're trying to lean towards that almost Crusader-esque open play at the line, flat type of ball, and that's going to change the way that they move with the game. In terms of where that attack could go, I haven't seen in my notes, at least to my research, how long Tony Brown has coached the under-20s. There's a bunch of kids that have gone through recently in the U20s that have done really well. For those of you who watch Super Rugby, you got a guy like Zarn Sullivan, you got your Caleb Clarks, you got your Carlos Spencer's son. You got tons of guys down there, young and old, who have succeeded in open play. So if he does and brings in that kind of culture into NOLA Gold, definitely think that's a remarkable upgrade. I just hope he doesn't have the same feelings as his brother with the Highlanders. That was kind of a garbage fire over the last couple of years, but there's opportunities definitely to have it there. Hopefully, Corey can bring in a couple guys like Beka Gigashvili or, any other retired Georgian players. They have a ton of old guard who obviously are still hanging on to help bring up the Georgian play. I definitely think they could bring them on as consultants to kind of edge up the game, bring in a foreign presence so that these guys can learn from some of the best set piece players in the world. He has the resources to do so. And the bodies is definitely the running. I think Jared Adams, will greatly improve on that. He was my forward of the year, I think, breakout wise for my MLR season. So I got big things and big expectations for NOLA. I expect them to be in the mix for that number 3 spot to edge out Rugby New York. I definitely think that they have the bodies and the scheme now to do it. I just got to see that execution. Obviously there's a lot of shakeup with the Free Jacks getting better, Old Glory getting they're looking nasty to come into this MLR 2024 competition. New York, obviously ATL is gone, and you got openings now. Make it the most of it and just ball out when the time comes. I'm excited for this year's season. I'm excited for the future of World Rugby. Off season may be slow, but the future is certainly bright. Thanks for tuning in. That's going to be it for me this week. I will see you next time. See you.